Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ginger Show. I am so excited to have Dr. David Bilstrom here with me today. Hi, Dr. Bilstrom.
Hi, Ginger.
So I just wanted to tell everybody a little bit about you before we get started. So Dr. Bilstrom is a physician, an author, a speaker, an educator, and the creator of the Autoimmune Paradigm Experts Course. He is also the medical director of the International Autoimmune Institute, Bingham Memorial Center for Functional Medicine. He has been practicing for 30 years and is quadruple board certified in functional and regenerative medicine, integrative medicine, physical medicine, and rehabilitation and medical acupuncture. He is an expert in the area of reversing and preventing autoimmune disease and is on a mission to revolutionize how autoimmunity is treated worldwide by teaching the science-based fundamentals of functional medicine. That was a mouthful.
Some big goals.
You are a very busy doctor.
I always love spending time with people that want to learn about these subjects.
Wow. So yes, it's my honor to have you on the show, and having somebody with your expertise come on the show and share with my audience, because we know that women are the biggest sufferers of autoimmune disease, and we know that there's 50 million people just in the US suffering. So to have you on the show and to share a little bit of your knowledge with my viewers is a true honor. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, so we're going to get right into it. And today the title of the show is The Gut and Mental Health Connection. And so we're going to be asking Dr. Bilstrom a couple of questions relating to that. And of course, this all relates to autoimmune disease. But first, we want to get the gut and the mental health stuff fixed, correct, Dr. Bilstrom?
Correct.
All right.
That's right.
So we're going to start with that first. And we may have Dr. Bilstrom back. If you guys clamor and tell me, hey, we want to know more, we can always bring him back for more information on this subject, because it is very important. All right. So Dr. Bilstrom, the first question is, how are gut health and mental health related?
That's a great question. So maybe I can preface this whole topic by saying I kind of joke around and talk about the brain having a superiority complex. It kind of sits up there on high and kind of goes, hey, body, I'm the brain. Don't drag me into your mess. The brain always gets dragged into the mess. So invariably, when people start having health issues, the brain's always going to be affected, whether it's memory, concentration, mood, anxiety, panic attacks, you name it, seizures, migraine headaches. The brain always gets kind of dragged into this mess. But as you fix what's going on, the brain always heals. Now, a lot of people, I think, have heard kind of the thing where, hey, the gut is the second brain. Well, there's a very direct connection between the gut and the brain. And there's other really interesting connections, and it all kind of drives chronic disease in general, including all the brain stuff. So one of the deep connections is, and the reason why they call the gut the second brain, is the gut has to make so many things that the brain needs to function well. So when we talk about the gut, we're kind of talking about the intestinal microbiome, the mix of the good, bad bugs in the gut. So people hear a lot about this microbiome in the gut. You want to have a lot of good guys in the gut fighting your battles for you. You don't want a lot of bad bacteria trying to take you down. You want that good mix. Well, the good bacteria in the gut make important things for the brain, such as the feel-good neurotransmitter serotonin. So serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter, it helps you stay calm. It helps with happy mood. It helps you sleep. It does so many great things for the brain. The gut makes pretty much 90% of all serotonin. Now, some of the serotonin the gut bugs make is for the gut. It helps you avoid constipation, but most of it gets to go up into the brain, and the brain goes, I feel so happy. My mood is great. I'm not anxious. I'm sleeping like a baby. Also, the gut makes the calming neurotransmitter GABA that creates all this calm. The gut makes melatonin, which helps with sleep-wake cycles. And if you're sleeping well and getting the restorative sleep, your brain's going to be a lot happier because of that as well. And so many people that have mental health issues are asked to take medications. And a big type of medication that gets used a lot of people are what they call the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So what those medicines do is they make your brain think you have more serotonin than you really do. And if you make the brain think you have more serotonin than you really do, you can feel better. So if somebody ever uses the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and they go, oh my, this made me feel better, my mental health is so much better with this, it always kind of begs the question, well, why do you need a medicine to make your brain think you have more serotonin than you really do. Why aren't you making enough serotonin all by yourself? Well, then it goes back to why isn't your gut making adequate amounts of serotonin to keep the brain healthy? And that's a super direct connection. And ideally, if you're on those meds to get through your day, great. But if you do this gut restoration, fix the gut will start making serotonin beautifully and GABA and other things. And then you might not even need those medicines long term because now your gut and your brain are working together and you have great mood, mental health is excellent, even without having to use those medicines long term.
Wow. Yeah, I did not realize that the gut created the serotonin. So, and of course, as a layman, most laymen would not know that. So for the serotonin stuff, I've heard, some people just say, oh, I just have low serotonin. That's how I was born. So is it probably that just their whole lives, they have not been eating in a way that is helping the gut make more serotonin? Or is this true that some people are born with less serotonin? What's your opinion on that?
Well, the things that drive chronic health issues can start very early on. There's ever so many things that can happen, like a traumatic birth. Labor goes too long, terribly traumatic. There's a lot of stress in the body. The mom who's trying to deliver the baby is under a lot of stress. And in her body, cortisol, the stress hormone, is produced at high amounts. Her body's under stress and duress. The developing baby is experiencing things, a lot of physicals, a lot of the stress hormone cortisol is being produced, and stress really hurts the gut. And so people notice a lot of times when you're under a lot of stress, your gut's not the happiest camper. So I'm under a lot of stress. I might get reflux just before a big test. You might have to run to the bathroom because you got to poop. Before this, you really feel the stress hits the gut. And so even at as early ages as that, a lot of stress hormone cortisol going through the mom, going through the baby, getting delivered, that cortisol can already be starting to disrupt the gut microbiome in the baby, almost before birth. But then definitely there's still some of this cortisol flying through the body even after the baby's delivered that's already going to start disrupting the microbiome at those very early ages. And this is where you see sort of the beginnings of chronic health issues. Now, the body is so darn smart. It's always going to try to compensate for things. So usually once somebody actually has a symptom like, geez, I woke up today and I feel depressed, or I woke up this morning, I feel anxious, usually that's about 10 to 20 years in the making because the body's been fighting to fight, and it just finally loses the fight and you go, oh my goodness, something's going on, I'm not feeling good. Well, that kind of fight that the body has to start working on can start right from the get-go. And with a compromised intestinal microbiome, it may be hard to make serotonin really right from the get-go, but also then a lot of things that tend to happen, like early use of antibiotics, using things like Motrins and Advils will do it. At old enough ages, birth control pills can disrupt the intestinal microbiome. A lot of medicines can disrupt the intestinal microbiome. There's ever so many things that can kind of do that at such early ages that it kind of sets the body up and the brain up for having troubles down the line.
Yeah, and I know that mental health is a big part of your practice. I know your partner, who's also happens to be your wife, is a mental health clinician, and she works in tandem with you at the hospital and does an ACEs test, I believe, on the patients. Is that the correct term?
Yep. Adverse childhood events, right.
So yeah, so let's talk about that for a second, because now it's starting to make sense to me why people in adulthood might say, well, my serotonin levels are low, because a lot of times these are people that have experienced a lot of childhood stress, trauma in the childhood, or just getting unmet needs as a child. So those types of things, if those types of things happen in your childhood, they actually affect the gut.
Right. Yep. And then the gut being such a big central mechanism for everything, not only does the gut have a hard time making adequate serotonin, adequate GABA, and other things, but with the gut being such a central mechanism, things get thrown off that just compound the problem on top of what's already there. So, for example, the gut has to digest your food and get all the nutrients out. But if you can't absorb nutrients, you don't have these vitamin and minerals that your brain needs to be healthy, happy, all that kind of stuff. the gut's the main organ of detoxification. So every cell in our body makes these toxic byproducts of metabolism every day. We got to run our detox pathways, put the toxic things into the gut and poop them in the toilet. When the gut's disrupted, we tend not to be able to get them in the toilet because the gut gets leaky. A lot of people hear about this leaky gut. These toxins reactivate and reabsorb back in the system, building over time. The brain is really sensitive to toxins, including, unfortunately, we live in a very toxic world nowadays with environmental toxins. So things like lead, mercury, flame retardants, pesticides, herbicides, plastics, all these kind of things, they get in. We have to run our detox pathways, get them into the gut, get them in the toilet. The leaky gut allows them to recycle. They build over time because most of these toxins, environmental toxins that bug us, are the fat-soluble, water-soluble toxins we can pee out, sweat out, that kind of stuff. These fat-soluble toxins get stuck in our fat stores. And the brain is actually 60% fat. So you kind of joke around and say we're a bunch of fatheads. But because those fat-soluble toxins get into the brain, they really compromise brain health as well. And then the immune system, 80% of the immune system surrounds the gut. Now, our immune systems are supposed to keep away things that are not us, they're going to make us sick, like infections and other kind of things. When the gut gets disrupted, it throws off the immune system, or when cortisol gets kicked up into the stress mode, that suppresses the immune system's ability to prevent infections. And infections can get into the body, or ones that are inherently there in the first place will rear their ugly head and create chronic health issues, including many of these infections that drive chronic disease, which is different than the infections that drive obvious disease, such as, oh, I have a high fever and diarrhea, all this kind of stuff. The infections that drive chronic disease are different. Things like Epstein-Barr virus, herpes virus 6, Coxsackie virus, one called mycoplasma. These are all the classic ones that drive chronic disease. Almost every one of those infections that drives chronic disease likes to get to the brain and start disrupting the brain as well. So with the gut disruption, can't make serotonin GABA, can't get nutrients out of your food that the brain needs, you can't get rid of toxins, that's going to in fact impact the brain, and then the immune system gets disrupted and these infections start driving chronic disease that like to get to the brain and disrupt it as well. But this is where you fix the gut, you fix every one of those aspects of why the brain is being compromised, and invariably the brain that's been saying, hey body, don't drag me into your mess, has that totally gotten dragged into the mess. People just almost like naturally fix it all by themselves as they fix the gut.
Wow. So before we get into, how do we create a healthy gut, before we go there, you had mentioned all of the toxins now that are in our environment. And it made me really wonder, because I know that disease in general, even though medicine has gotten more advanced, medicine is definitely, keeping people alive longer. There's no doubt about that. But we see more disease now, don't we? We see more autism. We see more autoimmune. We see more, a lot of stuff going on with kids nowadays. Do you think that all of maybe these environmental toxins and the bad food that we're eating, for example, processed foods, I know is something on your list of things as a no-no. Do you think all of these are actually affecting when the mother is, it's being passed down? And is this part of the problem of why we're seeing more disease nowadays? I'm just wondering if there's a connection there.
Yeah, so the thought process is that these environmental toxins compromise our system so dramatically that that's a big reason why kids have so many health issues now compared to what they used to. So like when I grew up around Chicago, all my schools were huge schools. I was in a huge grade school. On this entire grade school, there was like one kid that had asthma, the one child that had to carry an inhaler. Now, it's like 1 in 50 children born in the US and Canada have autism. Every other kid's got developmental delays, ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression. Every other kid's got asthma, peanut allergies, gluten intolerances. All these things just weren't happening a few generations ago. And the thought is that these environmental toxins really compromise the health. And the way they tend to compromise the health is the way that we kind of develop chronic disease in general. So we used to think our genes, our DNA that are in every cell in our body that tells the cells what to do was hardwired. Kind of like whatever we got good, bad, otherwise from parents and grandparents. And we're hoping that we got more, good than bad, kind of a thing.
Right.
It turns out it's not what genes we have, it's actually which ones get turned on and turned off. And so it turns out there's ever so many bad genes in our DNA, every cell in the body, we got to turn those guys off. Ever so many good genes, we got to turn them on. But when people aren't feeling their best, it's because they got flipped the wrong way. And this is why it's so easy once you start getting some health problems to get like one thing after another, after another, after another. And you're like, holy cow, where's this coming from? Well, if you're flipping the genes the wrong way in every cell in the body, eventually every cell in the body is going to be told the wrong information and you start getting all these health issues. But we know where this stuff comes from. Vitamin deficiencies, toxicity, infections, hormone imbalances, and is a very important one in women called estrogen dominance. I'd love to touch base on here. And you know, okay, we can fix this. And then people go, oh, I'm starting to feel better. Oh, I'm feeling a lot better. Oh, I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling great. And then we lock people in place and they just don't tend to get stuff. Now, you can do that with an adult. An adult says, hey, I got these health issues. Let's flip you. Oh my gosh, I feel great, including my anxiety's gone, my panic attacks are gone, my depression's gone, I'm sleeping like a baby because insomnia's gone, my bipolar 1, my bipolar 2, my bipolar 97, whatever it is, it's like, well, the brain will heal. Now, we know that if we can do this flipping of genes and optimizing epigenetics, the things that influence gene expression by age 19, we lock people in place. They just don't get stuff as an adult. They just don't get chronic disease, including like the very best time to prevent breast cancer is before age 19. Now, because we know where this stuff works, it's not hard to prevent breast cancer. So for example, if a woman's vitamin D is above 60, she has automatically decreased her risk of ever getting breast cancer by 82%. 60 is about 20 points lower than you should be, but it's like, oh my goodness, preventing stuff is so easy. But if you can flip epigenetics before age 19, you just don't get stuff. Now, if you can flip epigenetics before somebody has a child, you actually pass on cleaner genes to the next 6 to 8 generations.
Wow.
The corollary is we're the product of the previous 6 to 8 generations where things have happened,
Right.
adverse childhood events, traumas, very challenging things where people's genes have been started to flip the wrong way generations before us because the epigenetics was not optimized. We keep passing it from generation to generation. A big one to throw off epigenetics is the environmental toxicity. So here's a lot of things that could flip genes the wrong way, including environmental toxicity. Epigenetics that's not as ideal as we'd like keeps getting passed on from generation to generation and things kind of build. Now, when it comes to women, it's even more challenging because there are so many bad genes on the X chromosome. So women get 2 copies of the X chromosome, guys get 1 X, 1 Y. There are so many bad genes on the X chromosome that for a woman to be optimally healthy, she has to shut down over 85% of all the genes on the entire second X chromosome. The entire chromosome in every cell in her body, she's got to almost shut down the entire thing if she's going to be optimally healthy. So for women, the challenge to stay healthier is much greater than men because of this challenge of epigenetics that is thrown off by vitamin deficiencies, infections, cortisol, hormone imbalances, environmental toxicity, and those kind of things. Poor brain is just waiting to be thrown off.
Yes, well, and that explains why the majority of people who have autoimmune disease are women. So, and I would love, let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about how we create the healthy gut, and then we can touch a little bit on estrogen dominance. I would love to have you back on to do a whole show on estrogen dominance because I know this is a very important subject, and this is on the Everyday Woman show. So even though we don't exclude men, men are always welcome and included but this is a woman's network that we're actually going to be streaming on 19 platforms. So I'd love the women to know about the estrogen dominance, and I think we should dedicate a show to it. But I would love you to touch base on it after we talk a little bit about how do we create a healthy gut. So I'm hearing you're telling me we need to fix the gut, Ginger, not just for us, but for future generations. We need to work on our kids with working on their gut. I know my sister's been, following all your protocols for her children, and it's really changed dramatically, especially my niece who's 13, who's been suffering from a lot of acne. Almost all of her acne's gone away. She's been feeling better. So I know that your protocols work, but can you give us a little bit of time today on how do we get a healthy gut, Dr. B? How do we do it?
Yeah. And so as I kind of suggested with the vitamin D levels and preventing breast cancer, when we talk about preventing stuff, usually the more traditional allopathic world makes it seem really either way too complicated or way too vague. They kind of go, oh, exercise and manage stress. And you're like, okay, that's vague and complex at the same time. If you know the language the body speaks, it's really not that hard. So one thing would be create calm. Because if stress hurts the gut, if you create calm, the gut's going to be liking that a whole bunch. There's ever so many ways to create calm. If you keep your vitamin D in a good place, now most people are going to need between 5 and 10,000 IU of vitamin D every day just to stay good once they get good. And oftentimes people need more than that. The gut really likes vitamin D every day. So this is one thing where we use vitamin D to heal, but also to maintain health. We ask people to continue to take vitamin D every day. That might be like the only thing you need to do every day once you feel great, but that's a great way to stay healthy. And then there's a real big central mechanism in the gut that has to do with vitamin D. And people hear a lot about vitamin D, but what people don't hear a lot about is vitamin D receptors. And so every cell in your body has receptors for things the cells need to function. One thing that people tend to hear a lot about is called insulin resistance, where you have insulin made by your pancreas to control blood sugar. But if the insulin receptors in your cells have become resistant, the insulin can't attach and do the work. And it's almost like you don't have insulin, blood sugar goes up, creates diabetes, all this. Well, it turns out there's so many more vitamin D receptors in the gut than any other body part. And those vitamin D receptors can become resistant to vitamin D. And when that happens, this whole domino effect of terrible stuff happens. You fix it, this whole domino effect of great stuff happens. So the original data from 2018 was, wow, if you can fix this, you can turn around any autoimmune disease, including some of the more challenging ones like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease that attack the gut. But also looks like this is about what you want to do for everything. So 6 months later, the same research came out and go, oh my goodness, if you can fix the intestinal microbiome this way by fixing the vitamin D receptor resistance, it's a nuclear weapon against diabetes. And not just diabetes, but insulin and blood sugar control, but abnormal weight gain, cholesterol issues, heart attack and stroke risk. So there's a nuclear weapon against diabetes simply by fixing the gut. And then more recently, the Harvard Journal of Psychiatry came out and go, oh my goodness, if you can right this intestinal microbiome this way, you can treat major depressive disorder with it. And another article came out that was entitled The Intestinal Microbiome's Role in Personality Traits. Well, if you can right the microbiome this way, you become more outgoing and more social. Or even personality traits can shift as you shift the gut. And you can kind of see this profound impact on brain chemistry by fixing the intestinal microbiome, fixing this vitamin D receptor resistance. And once again, it's not that hard. We know how to do it. Daily vitamin D, daily probiotic, and daily butyrate. Now, everybody probably has heard vitamin D probiotics. The butyrate might be a little new, but the good bacteria in the gut make butyrate. On the digestive stool analyses that we ask people to do the poop test, they actually test for butyrate in your poop because it's so darn important. So it's very important for the gut, keeps away colon cancer, for example, because it keeps away excessive inflammation in the gut. But then butyrate gets out of the gut into the rest of the body, and it actually prevents cancer 5 different ways. It actually treats cancer 5 different ways. They're using a prescription version to treat non-small cell lung cancer nowadays. If you get a stroke, it helps the brain recover. So important for brain. It's like, oh my goodness, this butyrate is great. The triad, we call it the foundational triad because this is such a central mechanism to fix this vitamin D receptor resistance, is profound all by itself. And for example, the combination and the butyrate itself almost exclusively work through epigenetics. And thus they're flipping genes in every cell in your body. Thus they can do this, all at the same time. So by optimizing the intestinal microbiome with this triad, the gut lining stops making chemicals that create inflammation that keep the gut all irritated. And then the gut lining actually starts making proteins that are specific for keeping the bad bugs down for the rest of your life. So you get this optimized intestinal microbiome, healthy gut, healthy brain, kind of healthy everything because you're flipping genes in every cell in the body. And of course the brain goes, that feels nice for me too.
Okay, so we got the foundational triad, you called it. So that's butyrate, vitamin D, which I take your vitamin D every day, and the probiotics. So I just need to add those other 2 things. And then in addition to that, what about I think gut, I think, what should I be eating? What should I not be eating? Can you go over that a little bit with us? And I'm one of those people that's not the best eater. My sister is much better at, vegetarian type of lifestyle, and I'm not that great at it. So if you can talk to somebody like me, who's kind of what you would call a normal eater, I don't do a ton of processed food, but so give us some tips with the food, because that's got to affect the gut. Yeah. And
so I think, the nutrition is very important, of course. Ideally, some foods have a lot higher nutrient content than others. Now, the highly processed foods like fast foods and the highly processed foods that come in boxes and cans and all that kind of stuff just don't have a great nutrient content. But on the other hand, if the gut's disrupted, even if you're eating high quality, high nutrient content foods, you're not going to be digesting your foods and getting the nutrients out.
okay.
So this is where people can make a big change in the nutritional plan and go, well, I thought this was going to really change everything. I don't really think I feel a whole lot better. Or maybe I feel a little better, but not great. It's because you're really not able to get the bang for your effort because you have a disrupted gut. But in general, you love to eat more high quality, real foods. Shopping your fruits and veggies, meats, nuts, beans, those kind of things, and try to avoid the highly processed, low nutrient content foods. That's at least going to give your body the chance to get the nutrients out and get the bang for your effort. But this is where the body is so damn smart. We always kind of say that, well, you don't have to be perfect, just perfect enough. So it's not like you got to make, become the healthiest eater in the entire world if you're going to have any chance to be healthy. You just kind of, trend that way, but then make these other changes. And then your body goes, fantastic. I got nutrients. They're coming in. I can actually get them out of my food and get them into the body. I can then use those to fix anything, including if you're stressing your body out, throwing off cortisol because you're eating foods that are stressing out the body, a lot of highly processed bad foods. Your body's kind of under stress because it's getting these bad foods in. Well, just kind of starting to avoid some, eating the higher quality ones. Even cortisol goes, I like that new food stuff that this person's doing. You reset cortisol, that helps the gut, and this whole domino effect starts going right.
Well, thank you for sharing, and I'm glad you mentioned meat. I do, eat meat. I'm not a vegetarian, and so I'm glad that you mentioned meat. I know that, I should be focused on meats that don't have probiotics or don't have hormones, antibiotics, grass-fed, organic. So I do try to, when I eat meat, focus on making sure it's good meat. So thank you for not telling me I had to become a vegetarian. I was worried about that. All right. And then the last thing is, at the end of my show, I always ask for 3 tips. So 3 tips that you could give us today relating to the premise of my show, which is work, life, and wellness. So if you could give us a little tip on each before we wrap it up, would be great.
Oh, sure. So when it comes to work, I think it's important to, ideally surround yourself with a very healthy work environment, but also it's really important to take breaks. And when you take a break, it doesn't have to be a long break. The body's too smart to require long breaks. So even like just at your desk, 3 slow, deep breaths, kind of the diaphragmatic breath where your belly comes in and out as your diaphragm goes up and down, rather than breathing with our neck muscles here. We get the diaphragm going. 3 deep breaths. Now that also works at stoplights as well. Now, life itself, as I'd say, you want to manage stress as best you can. Right? We live in a very stressful world. It's inherently very stressful to be a human being. In your life, you want to try to cultivate calm. And then when it comes to wellness, I always kind of say, well, wellness, it makes a lot of sense. So sense being S-E-N-S-E, you want to manage stress well. You want to eat as well as you can. You want to get out in nature. Nature has been shown in many scientific studies to improve human health and well-being. Optimize sleep hygiene, and then exercise. And when it comes to exercise, it doesn't have to be aggressive. There are studies that show if you get 10,000 steps in a day, you have decreased your risk of ever getting Alzheimer's by 51%. You just cut your risk of Alzheimer's by 51%, 10,000 steps. So the body's too smart to need big stuff, but a little bit of all this stuff goes a long way.
Excellent. And I did promise you, we will have you back for estrogen dominance. I think it deserves its own show, Dr. B, because I think it's just, I don't know, I don't want to get into it too much today because I think, it deserves its own show. So if you would be willing to come back, doesn't have to be this month, but maybe next month, and give us another half hour of your time. And we could just focus on estrogen dominance if you would be willing.
I'd be happy to.
And then great. And then if you could, because I know my viewers are going to be wondering, how do they find you? Do you have any, thing that you're offering to people to, educate themselves? So if you could tell us the best way for our viewers to find you.
Sure. They can go to my website, which is drdavidbilstrom.com. And I'd love to invite everybody to access our new free online email course called Medical Bill Detox. And you can access it on medicalbilldetox.com. So we're trying to detox people from high medical bills where all this stuff starts going on. And it's basically a course that teaches you where all this stuff comes from, but also hopefully puts everybody in a position to actually do this themselves, actually fix things yourself, the mental health issues, other kind of health issues. And because the body is super, super, super complicated, but it is super, super logical. And when you kind of start learning the logic, you'll go, oh my goodness, this actually isn't as hard as I would have thought. And that's what the course can teach people to do themselves.
Excellent. Well, thank you again very much for your time today. I know how busy you are, and I appreciate you taking the time, and we will have you back. I will talk to your assistant and make sure we get you scheduled on for the next episode, which will be on estrogen dominance. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.